Welcome to our Degenerate Friday edition of Bury Your Bookie. I'm Jeff DeForest. Very happy to have you guys with us as we head into a real interesting slate of college and pro football over the weekend and a couple of other things off the beaten path that we want to talk about on the show as well. But we should begin by singing, Oh, happy day, oh, happy day. Now, the story, background on me, I spent my entire junior year at Syracuse University trying to decode the fix at the harness track that was about 15, 20 miles out of town. And that was Vernon Downs, which surprisingly I find out is still in existence because this place was a dump of all dumps. I mean, you talk about a D grade harness track. That was Vernon Downs. And we thought we were onto something. We ended up making a giant score. And it turned out it was flawed logic that we were using because none of the circumstances that we thought would dictate the outcome of these races what were actually being met. We just happened to get lucky and make a giant score one time, but that was it. I mean, my misspent youth was all determined by the outcome of this one race. And I was able to pay for the senior year of college, and then I didn't make really great use of that. Actually, it's funny. Bob Costas, the great Bob Costas, who is now coming under serious scrutiny for maybe being a shot fighter after a couple of missed calls in his play-by-play on the Yankees and the Kansas City Royals series, where he's calling the ball is into center field. He almost went John Sterling, did he not? On this, as he's just completely misguided on the play-by-play calls that he's given in this series on TBS. But he was a grade beneath me while going to Syracuse University. The guy was great. I mean, through his whole career. I don't know what's happening with him right now, but unfortunately, he's been a way off. But if you're following tip horses, and in my lifetime, since we thought we had mastered what was going on at Vernon Downs outside of Syracuse, I've probably been given what in excess of 1,000 tip horses, and we talked about the ethical aspect of this when you're a degenerate, and that is, are you obligated to give a tip horse out to your friends? So yesterday at the end of the show, we mentioned a horse, Delaware Park, sixth race Delaware Park, relatively obscure. A friend of ours owns the horse called Magical or Majestic Eagle. And sure enough, a rarity occurred, and the horse jiggity jogged. So we made you a little bit of money yesterday, and maybe you can apply that to what goes on this coming weekend in college football. Now, if you are betting on these games, Bet Online is the place to go. The world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything sports betting. Every stat, every matchup, every breakdown, even live odds and spreads to bet on while the games are in progress, which is a dicey proposition sometimes, but you can make some money if you have some instincts. With the largest catalog of odds on everything from football, MLB playoffs, NHL, NBA to political props, when the game's over, head on over to our online casino. You can get involved in a game of blackjack, a game of poker, or unwind on over the 150 slot games that they make available to you. Head to the website today to get in on all the action. America's most trusted site for online gaming and wagering. Bet Online. The game starts here. All right, we want to dive right into some college football, and we're going to bring on the professor. Professor started out last week with a dynamic winner as Syracuse rallied in the final couple of minutes to force an overtime, then won outright. They were getting 6.5 points in that game against UNLV, which had reached the college football rankings, and then spot on that one. Saturday, we got touched up a little bit, but we welcome back into the show, and I think he's going to make a very strong comeback this week. Our good friend, the professor, college football savant, in my opinion, maybe knows more about it than anybody that we talk to about the subject. Professor, how are you? How you feeling this week?
I'm okay. You keep calling that Syracuse game lucky. I don't
I
get
don't know
it.
if it was lucky. It was kind of you felt confident as they were down 7 with 3 minutes to go. I guess they had been
Again,
stopped. Yeah,
again. If the other team scores twice off of block punts and you still win, you were on the right side all along. Like
yeah.
there's no excuses when you block two punts for touchdowns and don't not only cover, don't win. Like I'm sorry, the other side was the correct side on that one. Now, if you want to beat me up about some of the wrong sides, I was dead ass on the wrong side of Missouri. I was dead ass on the wrong side of Alabama. That happens. I will fess up to it when I'm just flat out on the wrong side. But I don't think spread wise. there's any question, Syracuse was the correct pick in that game. Again, UNLV scores twice off of blocked punts. I went is that a 1 in 1,000 proposition, a 1 in 100,000 games proposition. I will defend that one all the way. Now again, some of the others on the wrong side of the biggest upset in I don't know since Appalachian State beat Michigan. I mean, big Vandy ever winning an SEC game, but over Alabama, that's a huge upset. So, got beat up a little bit last week, but we'd been off to a good season. We were probably due to step on a landmine at some point. It happens.
And that's part of the thing that you have to accept if you're going to do this, and it's a marathon. You can't necessarily get overwhelmingly upset if you have a week where you're on the downside of things, and you have to be able to survive those spots and then be able to embrace with confidence your plays that are coming up in the future. And I know you really like the card this week, so
I do.
I feel pretty comfortable. You have me convinced on a couple of these games that we talked about. So let's get right to it. And I love your depiction of the way that this outcome is going to go. Kansas State going against Colorado. I know you're not a huge fan of the whole Deion Sanders movement that's out there. And this is something I think that the public should be able to capitalize on. The mistaken impression that somehow Deion Sanders is a good recruiter and B, a good coach.
I think it's the exact opposite because I think that perception is entirely driven by the public. And again, I think it's indicative of the way lines and the sport had, particularly in college football, has been shaped by the app betting culture, I guess we will call it. Whereas, you go back pre the explosion of these apps, pre everybody in the world having FanDuel and DraftKings and other various sources, Hard Rock down here, on their phone. And lines were basically driven by big players. Lines were driven by the people who would go in to the sports book on a Sunday night and fire away max bets on the opening line. Now they're driven by everybody in the world betting $20 on these apps. What we have seen in this particular game, preseason line on this game was Kansas State -9 and a hook. What we saw at open Kansas State -5, down to Kansas State -3.5. It ain't from sharps. It ain't from big players. Those people do not respect the Colorado Buffaloes. This is a public-driven line. Again, you asked me yesterday, did I think Deion Sanders was the most overrated coach in the country? I had to say, I don't know anybody who's serious about the sport who rates the guy. Like everybody from a media standpoint to online to the gambling community thinks he's a joke. It thinks what he's done in Colorado is a joke. So again, I can't say he's overrated because I don't know anybody who rates him in the top 100 coaches in America, much less the top 10 or top 5 or whatever.
You would have thought if you saw that 60 Minutes piece, I guess they did two of them, that he was Newt Rockne reincarnated.
And that's the public perception. I mean, look, the public, and you see in the NFL, again, most serious football people I know think Dan Campbell might have a mental problem, like he might be disabled. But the public loves the rah-rah guys, whether it's Deion doing his preacher routine that I kind of think he stole from Michael Irvin because Michael Irvin used to do that on TV and radio like 20 years ago, or Dan Campbell doing his angry, tight end routine. The public eats that shit up, but people who cover it seriously generally think of those guys as a joke. Unfortunately for Deion, he doesn't have a Ben Johnson to cover him up the way Dan Campbell does in Detroit. Again, but let's get back to the specifics of this game. Kansas State is almost like Nebraska a couple of weeks ago, custom built to beat the holy hell out of Colorado. You look at things Colorado's bad at. They're bad on defense against the run. Kansas State runs the ball really well. They're bad along the line of scrimmage. Kansas State always notoriously good along the line of scrimmage. One of the areas where Deion doesn't recruit, and he's terrible at it, special teams. He doesn't have a good punter. He doesn't have a good kicker. He's got good gunners because he's got outside speed. But again, Kansas State has built their reputation over the years on making big plays in special teams. Pretty much everywhere you look at this game, again, Kansas State custom built to go in and absolutely throttle Colorado. And that's what's going to happen late Saturday night. I don't see any logic. I don't see anything you can point at that says Colorado's going to stay in this football game.
And you believe that Dion may also be on a mission to get his own son, and not necessarily just seriously hurt, but possibly even carried off the field
I
in a
mean,
body bag.
they like to throw the ball 60 times against, teams that are going to hit his kid like 90% of dropbacks. Like again, I did it as a joke that the KFC people may have to, send a helicopter to save Shador to maintain their commercial campaign. I don't think Shador's going to be a happy boy at the end of this one. I think much like the end of Nebraska, if you see him leave early at some point in the fourth quarter and just say, "Yeah, I'm done with this," and honestly, if I were him, I would be careful because in this particular scenario, if he's walking out the field through the tunnel, a Kansas State player might come hit him accidentally anyway. Yeah, again,
And maybe an omen, yeah, that they signed a team mortician
I
prior
almost
to
wish
this
someone
outing.
you had someone who was on the other side on this because I would love to hear the logic of taking Colorado beneath the top. I would personally, at the line it opened where it was in the preseason 9 hook, I would still probably be making a case for Kansas State here. So I would love to talk to somebody who's trying to make the case for Colorado at only 3.5 here. I think the line is insane. Again, we talked about it the last few weeks. Nothing to unload on. Tread cautiously. I think this is the exact opposite. This is the one, load up the ammunition and fire away.
All right, and you have made this like a five-star play, and you're
Yes,
recommending to people that
I hate that particular term, but
I
whatever
know
you,
you don't love that, but this is the double seal gold wheel platinum
yeah,
special of all time.
exactly. It's my lock of the week. I wish I had a lock to hold up. Yeah, game of the century.
But
All of that nonsense.
not opposed to going ahead and adding up whatever your normal denomination of wager is, just multiplying that exponentially
Well,
because
again,
you're that confident.
the name of the show, bury your book. If you're
Bury your
going to
bookie.
do,
We're going to bury
if
him with
you're
this one.
going to do that, if you take nothing else away from this particular, version of the show, it's that you have to have a scale. You have to have these are worth 1 unit, these are worth 2 unit, whatever your scale is. It doesn't matter, honestly. If you're a $20 player, you got to be able to, flex up maybe to 100. If you're a 50 guy, maybe to 500. Whatever your number is, you got to stay within your range, but be able to differentiate what the levels are. This one is a top level. Like you don't get these opportunities, every week. These are the kind of games where, you're locked in, you maybe see 3 or 4 of them a year. So, be ready to unload in those situations.
All right, Kansas State. Professor loving Kansas State minus 3.5 down from a preseason number of 9.5, taking out Deion Sanders and the Colorado Buffaloes. I know, and our friend Troy West was on a show Wednesday. He made this one of his games. He really likes Utah. That line he had at 5.5, but saying that he was also confident that Utah would beat and cover the spread against Arizona State.
Yeah, I'm with him on that. Now, people are looking at it on Friday morning when we're doing the show. The game is Friday night. Maybe going based on reports. I know Brett McMurphy put it out. I've seen it in a few other places among major that this will be the week that Cam Rising return. I am not basing this on Cam Rising return to quarterback at Utah. As I told you on the show, I'm not 100% convinced Cam Rising is still alive. I think there's like a 5% chance that Cam Rising died 2 years ago, and Utah has just been lying about it the whole time. They've been carrying his corpse
It's a
around.
weekend at Bernie's, yes.
Yes, they've been carrying his corpse around. There's a couple of, bench players whose job it is to just, carry him around and make people think Cam Rising is still living. So that's not my basis here. If it's Rising, I think that's just a huge plus for us. If it's Wilson, I'm totally comfortable with it because again, I don't think Arizona State's going to stop this running game. And if it's Rising, they ain't stopping the passing game either. But we'll see. In terms of that, you go back, and I think a lot of people have freaked out about Utah because they lost to Arizona. Go back and look at that game. Utah actually moved the ball pretty well against that Arizona defense, uh, but they turned the ball over, and that's going to happen. You're going to get these games where turnovers just hit you. Sometimes you can overcome them, sometimes you can't. Utah couldn't. Still a very solid football team, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. And Arizona State is not a solid football team on the offensive side of the ball. This reminds me of the spot we took Utah in a couple of weeks ago against Oklahoma State. I think Utah will be too physical on both sides of the line of scrimmage for an Arizona State team that does not specialize in that. Again, good speed at the skill positions for Arizona State, but I don't think they're going to be standing upright long enough to make use of that in this spot. I think Utah's defense will control this game. Again, Utah's one of those teams it's very difficult to say, oh, they're going to go in and win by 3 or 4 touchdowns because it's just not the style they play. But I think they will comfortably walk away covering this number at beneath a touchdown. Like I said, I saw this flex up to 6 last night at some point, but it's showing still back to 5.5. As long as it stays underneath the TD, we are comfortable here. 6.5 or less, totally comfortable in this spot.
All right, Kansas State minus 3.5 over Colorado. Utah minus 5.5 over Arizona State. Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. Earlier when
Everybody
they were
knows
playing these cupcake games, they could write their own ticket, and then they were stunned and tagged with a loss. And that may have given people an inclination to jump off the bandwagon. But you like them in this spot against LSU.
everybody knows how much I love Lane Kiffin. No. Look, you go back a couple weeks when everybody got off Ole Miss. It was because of a loss to Kentucky, where the Kentucky defense really stymied the Ole Miss offense. We got to stop being shocked when Kentucky gives teams a run for their money in these SEC games. Kentucky has a formula. It's not necessarily a great formula, but it is a formula that works for them. They play great defense. They run the football. They don't pass it very much, and we see that with how Will Levis brought his game to the pros, and how awful he's been because Kentucky did not prepare him for the NFL situation. So I'm not freaking out about the Ole Miss offense, which actually looked pretty solid last week against South Carolina, who has a really good defensive front in their own right. None of that's true of LSU's defense. LSU's defense under Brian Kelly has completely fallen apart. You're looking for NFL talent. They got one kid, their rush linebacker, who's an NFL player. I don't see any other players on that team who look like NFL talent to me. At least they're not showing it at this level. LSU can score. I'm not saying Ole Miss is going to shut them down or out. LSU is going to score some points in this game, but I don't think their defense is going to get very many stops in this game. And I do think that Ole Miss defense will create a couple turnovers, will create a couple big plays with sacks. LSU has been getting their quarterback hit. They did against USC, who looked like a real defense against LSU, and then all of a sudden, got to Michigan and got to Minnesota, and you're like, oh, it's the same USC. I think that's more about that LSU offensive line than it necessarily is about anything else. I think Ole Miss will create a couple big plays on defense here and comfortably get them over the line in a thin line game at 3.5. Really, honestly, kind of shocking to go into a matchup saying I think Ole Miss's defense is notably better than LSU's, but I think that's the case in 2024.
You're not the biggest Brian Kelly fan, maybe even equating him to the world-renowned circus clown Emmett Kelly when it comes to game day coaching and strategies.
I'm not the biggest Brian Kelly. I'm not the biggest fan of anybody who ever coached Notre Dame, but look, Brian Kelly.
You had to like Jerry Faust. Come on. I mean, just from a sympathy standpoint. When Parsegian was screaming, hey, stop it already. It's a killing, ref.
I was a little young for the Jerry Faust era. But again, Brian Kelly, he's done a decent job, but I think that he's living on that Heisman Trophy, more than anything else. I think if you look at his results for the last 3 years, marginal. Like he's basically played exactly to his talent level. And unfortunately, his talent level on the defensive side is not very high this year.
All right, so we have Ole Miss going against LSU. You're going to take that one. And Ohio State and Oregon, another game you're looking at. And I love this about you because you've been a big fan of the Quacking Ducks. But you see them flapping their wings to no avail against an Ohio State team that has a couple of wide receivers that you wouldn't mind seeing starting on some pro teams.
Again, you look at this matchup. Have been over the years a big fan of the Ducks, particularly at Outson, where they've pulled off a lot of big wins over the years. But I'm not a huge fan of the 2024 Ducks. You look at them; they have defensive problems all over the field. They have been ineffective in the red zone. Now, again, they only have Dylan Gabriel on a 1-year loan, which they did not get with Bo Nix. They got a couple of years. But there was a learning curve with Bo Nix in that offense in the first year. And then after it started to click for him, back half of that first year into the second year, they really started rolling. I think we are in the struggle phase with Dylan Gabriel, particularly in the red zone where Oregon has basically been ineffective most of the season. They move the ball well between the 20s, but they don't necessarily finish on a lot of drives. That's led to some struggles against some teams where they have a higher talent level. Again, Idaho If they're not more talented than Idaho, well, then there's a big problem in Salem, Oregon. If they are not more talented than Boise State, there's some talent problem. I watched that Boise State game. Boise should have won that game, mostly on the legs of Genty, who might be one of the better running backs in the country. Bad news, if you're playing Ohio State, you're facing two of the best running backs in the country, in Henderson and Judkins here. And I think that will take the day. And again, you combine that with the talent at the wide receiver position. I know people at Ohio State are not necessarily the biggest Will Howard fans in the world. You don't have to be the greatest quarterback in the world with this Ohio State receiving core. You can be a pretty average quarterback and look outstanding because your guys get so open consistently. The Ohio State wide receivers probably consistently win their matchups with defensive backs more than any group in the country. I think it's far and away the best wide receiver core in the country and has been for, I know, 5 or 6 years, which is why every spring you see multiple Ohio State wide receivers go in the first round. Going to be the same case with this group. Multiple first rounders playing, including the kid from down here who honestly looks like a first round pick as a freshman. So I have a strong suspicion that Ohio State not only handles their business here, they handle it in pretty easy fashion. I think even if Oregon can move the football, they will not be effective inside the red zone, and you'll see more 3s and 7s, which is not a good way to pull an upset on your home field. So I look for Ohio State to go in and probably do it pretty comfortable fashion. If it wasn't on the road, if this were a neutral site game, this would be one I'd be looking to unload on Ohio State. I don't think we're at that level because Outson has proved tricky for teams over the years, but I definitely think there's a strong side here, and I would not be surprised if Ohio State walks in and wins by 2-3 scores.
All right, nice quartet of games, a four-pack. Big, strong play on Kansas State over Colorado. Utah, which got the old double dot theory where you got affirmation from another source here on Bury Your Bookie. Utah to best Arizona State, cover 5.5. Ole Miss over LSU and that porous defense of Brian Kelly's. And Ohio State over Oregon, a personal favorite of the professor. You've made a lot of money on that team over the years and going against them here because, let's face it, you're following the money and figuring as much as you have not necessarily been the biggest embracer of Ohio State football. Going to go ahead and try to cash a ticket here with Ohio State. Excellent stuff as always, Professor. We thank you so much for joining us here. Best of luck with the plays. Looking for a big bounce back this week. And thanks so much for being with us on Bury Your Bookie.
You have a great one, Deef.
All right. Thanks a lot. The professor, Ken Jacobson, who does a great job. Really is. I have total faith in this guy. I got touched up last week with Missouri and Alabama. A lot of big upsets. People weren't necessarily. It was a shocker when Vanderbilt beat Alabama straight up. Much less the 22 points that Alabama was laying in that game. So you were pretty comfortable if you went on Vandy with the points. I don't know that anybody foresaw them winning the game straight up. If you did, then you should also send us a message here, and we'll be happy to feature you on Bury Your Bookie. And then Ohio State over Oregon. Started to say, I mean, the tip horse rarely comes in. We were so happy about this yesterday. It only paid $6.40, but what's wrong with a little 2-to-1 action? This horse, Majestic Eagle, at Delaware Park in the 6th race. I happened to get home just in time to see the action. There was about a minute to post. They're going in a gate. I saw the horse was favored. I didn't see what the morning line was, but I would imagine it was a bet down. There were many scratches in the race. It was a field of 7. And normally when this happens, we give out a horse. You'll have people text you right back after the horse finishes up the track, LMN, which is our code for lose my number. And you hate to see that. And we talked about this, the moral dilemma, the ethical dilemma. If you get a tip horse from somebody that if you vet it out, you figure they're a reliable source, are you obligated to give that out to your friends? That's an interesting aspect of things. And so I felt a little bit of an obligation. I really trusted the guy that gave me this horse. He never has given me a horse before. He owns the horse. So, and usually jockeys and trainers, the worst touts at the track. You could disregard their information and their opinion almost immediately. Hey, yeah, I worked the horse in the morning. This horse is running a hole in the wind. And then the horse throws the jockey at the gate, and everybody hates you after you've gone ahead and tipped them off on this thing. But in this case, the horse won and won for fun. You could see it was going to happen. Got off to a decent start, tucked in third on the rail as they were making the turn to enter the stretch. What was literally pulling the jockey out of the saddle, and then not even tapped once, under wraps, just jogged in the stretch. So we were very happy about that. And our thanks to our good friend Sheldon G. who is I thought his wager alone would be enough to knock this horse down to 1-9, but ended up paying $6.40. Nothing overwhelmingly exciting about the exotics. A $24 exacta, $166 on a dollar try. Daily double was $40, and the pick three was like 112. So you could have made a lot of different use out of this, but it's always good if you get a free square, and that was one of them yesterday with Majestic Eagle. I do have interest in this fight that's coming up over the weekend. I'm a big boxing fan, and boxing is usually a fairly profitable endeavor in terms of wagering, especially if you know the fighters. Now, you have Dmitry Bivol, who is a minus 150 favorite over Artur Beterbiev, who is a top-ranked fighter. They're fighting in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, Saturday night. You can catch the fight on ESPN Plus. I'm not sure or if there's any additional cost there. I'm assuming not. So, and this will be a very exciting fight. You have two undefeated light heavyweights. It's as good a fight as we've seen in a long, long time in any weight division in terms of the matchup. Bivol, a very slick boxer, being accorded the favorite's edge, in spite of the fact that from a power standpoint, he doesn't compare favorably with Beterbiev. And I'm going to go ahead and take a shot with Artur Beterbiev to survive the slick boxing skills of Bivol and pull off the upset here, although it might be a mild one. And the added angle on this particular fight is if Beterbiev wins, you almost have to assume it's going to be by knockout. So that would be my play. A little taste there overall at plus 125. And whatever you can get on the knockout, I'm assuming that Bivol will be able to survive at least the early rounds. So somewhere between rounds 7 and 10. I'm thinking Beterbiev finally catches up with him. It's a similar matchup that we saw many years ago when a killer in the ring there, Sergey Kovalev, Russian guy who wasn't particularly popular, but man, he had knockout power, and he went against Andre Ward, a very popular American fighter and Olympian. I thought that Kovalev got robbed in the first fight, and he got jobbed in the second fight by poor officiating, and the first fight by the officials that were scoring the fight. And then the second time, because the referee missed the fact that Andre Ward had fouled Kovalev right before he ended up getting the stoppage. So very similar in terms of styles. You have a monster knockout artist against a guy that's a pretty slick boxer. Bivol outstanding at 23-0. But Beterbiev with 20-0 and 20 knockouts looks like the play to me. I'm going to take a shot with him. It should be a very enjoyable fight, and we'll see what happens. And short of an Adelaide Bird scorecard, which let's never forget that 118, 110, Canelo. Bivol annihilated Canelo Alvarez, won virtually every round by a wide margin, and ended up only getting a 115, 113 trio of scores in beating Canelo Alvarez, one of two Canelo losses, although you probably could have attributed a few more on Canelo's record there. Certainly, Erislandy Lara could make a case that he had beaten Canelo Alvarez convincingly. And in this case, Bivol was much superior at a high weight for Canelo. Boxing at 175 maybe was a little out of Canelo's zone in terms of weight divisions, but going to be very interesting. I'm going to take a shot here with Artur Beterbiev, the top-ranked fighter, going against Dmitry Bivol in Saudi Arabia coming up on Saturday night. A real good clash for the undisputed light heavyweight championship of the world. Plus 125 looks pretty good to me on Beterbiev, and I'm thinking if he wins, it has to be by knockout, so I'm also going to put a little taste on that. You got the baseball also coming up, and a decisive game in the San Diego Dodgers series, Darvish against Yamamoto. Yamamoto, who came at great expense to the Dodgers, pitching in Japan last year. They didn't really get a lot of mileage out of him, although he distinguished himself pretty well when he was in there with a 7-2 record and a earned run average at 3.00. But he got tagged by the Padres when he opened up the series and gave up 5 runs in 3 innings of work. Darvish has been pretty effective. Went 7 innings in his start and to a 1.29 earned run average. So interesting matchup there tonight. I used to be a big Dodger fan because I covered the team for a while when I was out in Los Angeles. Always liked the organization, first-class organization. I'm kind of pulling a little bit for San Diego because I like the upset. But Yamamoto and Darvish dueling it out tonight. And we do have to tip our hat to our handicappers, Troy West and Mike Jones, who both had a lean on the Guardians that they expressed on the show in last night's ball game, and they pull it out 5-4. We wish you all the luck in the world. I'm still Going to go ahead and back my Buffalo Bills in the Monday night game. We'll talk more about that when we recap the weekend on Monday here on Bury Your Bookie. But in spite of the coaching change and the record in the last 14 years of interim coaches being very favorable, both straight up and against the spread, I don't think this is enough to get the Jets over the top here. And I think now that we know that Josh Allen is going to be playing in this game, even if he's speaking in Hebrew for Yom Kippur at the press conference before the game, because of the concussion issues that popped up last week when his head hit the turf there, bounced off the canvas like he'd been thrown body slammed to the canvas in a pro wrestling match. I still think the Bills are a better team and will find their way after a couple of losses to beat the New York Jets, so I'm willing to lay the 2.5 and out. All right, good luck over the weekend. Have fun, everybody. Make some money, and we'll see you Monday with the next edition of Bury Your Bookie.